come for the thrills, telling truths and hope you won't find any black pills. Right beneath the surface, pull back the propaganda veil, find truth, freedom, and justice. It's red, right, and real.
Hello, and I am Bella D'Angelo, AK.
How are you, Bella?
I am fabulous.
Beautiful day in America.
It's a beautiful day, and I'm going to leave this as a teaser because I was going to open with my trails and tribulations of, I finally come to the realization dating online is simply a front for all the pedo and serial killers in across and Richard Dahl, who's joining us as our guest. Richard gets to hear my random phone calls of, hey, I bet you can't top this one. I'm going to say my story of literally a week ago, and this ties into what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about tariffs. We're going to talk about the stock market. We're going to talk about, just the mastermind behind Trump and what all he's doing, which are very many complicated things all at one time. But if you would have talked to me on Monday, I was hell-bent for Mary to be back in the North Dakota oil field. And when I say I have stories, I was starting to tell you the story about when I was homeless for a stretch back the first time, my tour of duty, which I have a t-shirt that says I survived Williston, North Dakota for very good reasons. But anyways, I literally had to find temporary roommate situation. But I just want to read you this because this would be right up the alley, and then we'll get into this show. This would be right up in the alley of a conversation that I would have, AK, after like identifying somebody online. You have no idea if it's the right profile picture, but you've had normal conversations up until this, right? So you sit down, and now he tells you really what he does, because this is a posting on Facebook, and someone is legitimately looking for this. Allegedly, I'm a very detail-orientated man looking for anyone needing their house cleaned with a bonus of an exhibitionist naked male maid. Only serious people need reply, as I'm a professional. Of course you are. Seeking exhibitionist naked house cleaning in Williston and fun all in one. So contact me for the details and services offered. My dominatrix wife will accompany me as me as well, but only in a supervisory capacity, and she loves to see her pony working. Can't even get a smile, a laugh. Nope. I guess we're not going there.
Our humor is so much different. I mean, it's a good one, right? The show pony.
Hey, I'm just saying there's the oil field is one of the absolute best places in the world that I got to experience. There's also the other side of it where there is a lot of very interesting and diverse because of a boom and what it brings. And we can talk more about this. I just want to say there were really great things and great people, and some of my best friends are still from there. And I would love it if North Dakota could boom and thrive again, because I would go back in a heartbeat. But let's start out with because there is so much conversation. There is so much, there's just so much fear mongering, and yet people aren't understanding. We are dealing with Donald J. Trump and the tariffs. So, AK, you want to kick it off, and then we'll hand it over to Richard.
Yeah. So first and foremost, make sure you guys hit the like button. Make sure that you guys also hit the share button, because if you don't like and share, no one else is going to see this episode. We are on episode 13. Episode 13 of Bella D'Angelo and AK Kamara's experiment. It's called Red, Right, and Real. We stream on Rumble, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. And so just, again, make sure that you guys hit the like button, share button. So clearly, if you have a TV and if you have a 401k like 37-ish% of the rest of Americans, you've probably heard nonstop ad nauseum that Donald Trump's tariffs are destroying America. At least that's what the mainstream corporate narrative is as things are going right now. And so I think it's important. We talked about this our last episode that we were going to kind of get into it. We do have Richard Dahl here with us, who also has, I think, some great insight into kind of the overall picture. So here's what I want to do. I want to first set the stage.
Perfect.
So the United States, prior to President Trump being elected, has basically for the better part of 80 years been allowing other countries to take advantage of us economically. Now, the question is why? Well, after World War II, the European theater in Europe itself was just in shambles, right? Most of the fighting that happened during World War II it just devastated Europe. And then also in Southeast Asia and South Pacific, a lot of fighting happened there. Clearly, we didn't have any skirmishes hand-to-hand in the United States proper. On Hawaii, of course, we had Pearl Harbor. But because of that, the geniuses of the organization that eventually became, United Nations, got together and said, let's sign this thing called the Marshall Plan. And so the idea was, in order for the United States, who did not have economic devastation because we didn't have bombs dropping in the United States, we were going to help out these other countries by purposely having tariffs imposed against us and then not imposing tariffs or far, far, far less tariffs than were being imposed against us. So those countries would be able to get the benefit of Americans buying their products, therefore helping build their economies. That was the entire plan going back again. So set the stage, understand that's what happened. Fast forward 80-ish years, and here we are with a lot of these same just lopsided deals where America at this point, because we are consumers, when we're buying all these products from all these other nations, but not selling our products in other nations, not manufacturing our products in other nations, our American jobs have been fleeing to other countries, cheaper labor. And Richard, before we jumped on, you talked a little bit about this, but then you also have slave labor that plays into this entire aspect. So that's what the stage has been set for. So President Donald Trump says, I'm going to use tariffs to completely reorganize our standing, not just in the United States, but globally. And it's going to be something that is going to make a lot of people freak out about. But this is what we need to do as a nation to take back our manufacturing and our economy into our own hands. Because without it being in our own hands, these other nations truly have the ability to shut us down if we don't have a good mechanism. And it loses our sovereignty, like we lose our sovereignty, because we are now at the whim of NATO or other organizations, other entities, when it comes to what we can do without suffering severe economic damage to ourselves. So that's at least my analysis of where we kind of are. And going forward, the question is, what are Trump's tariffs going to be able to actually accomplish? And so, Richard, I'm kind of curious what your perspective is, because I haven't told you yet. And I'll wait for you to kind of explain what you think the ultimate goal and how it's going to be accomplished of what President Trump is doing through tariffs. I gave the general overview, but what do you think? What do you think the overall objective is or goal is? And just what is your insight about how these tariffs are going to work?
Well, I mean, I think that I took the same position that Trump did when I graduated in college. I wrote a thesis that basically two things really I highlighted. And that was number one, we needed to have tariffs. And this has been a long time ago. And number two, we needed strong antitrust laws. And the reasons are because if we have no manufacturing, if we don't have our own steel industry, if we don't have our own oil, if we don't have our own food, we can literally be starved out by another country. We can be defeated militarily. The reason we won World War I and World War II is because we had better manufacturing than anyone in Europe, anyone in the world. And the reason we had better manufacturing is because literally we had tariffs. We didn't even have an income tax until in like 1916 or so. So, and in fact, is all that all that did by removing tariffs and having an income tax, it impoverished the middle class, and it allowed the multinational companies to arise. In other words, when you're a company on the stock exchange, you have no loyalty to any particular country. And since the UN formed in 1948, basically they want the United States to go down, because we are the country every time that has stood in. I mean, Germany was essentially trying to create a world government at the time that it was trying to take over the world. I mean, this has been the goal of the people that are in favor of a new world order, they want it to be socialist. They decided this in the 1880s. So some of them said it would take 3 world wars to get us to this point. And so basically, in my opinion, that's why Trump has to be careful of a 3rd world war. I think what Trump is doing right now is he's imposing the tariffs to bring industry back to the United States, number one. And number two, he wants to enrich the middle class, because right now we have a middle class that's falling apart. And if it falls apart much more, we're having a moral decay. I was in court this morning, and about half the people changing their name in the cases before I was coming up are changing their name because they are deciding to be a different sex. Insane. And that's only because of propaganda from our school system, which is insanely leftist in Minnesota. And I can't imagine how many people are going to, I mean, if you look at the real facts and the real statistics, most of the people who have their genitals removed and have all this done to themselves are going to want to commit suicide in about 5 to 10 years. Right?
Right.
I mean, there's no way. But what I see overall, what Trump is trying to do is you put these tariffs on, it's going to make the stock market take a hit. He knew that, because why is it taking a hit? The multinational companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, and all these people that hold all the assets of the rich people. In addition, they hold all the assets of the government and the civilian employees that want to invest in the stock market through whatever kind of fund they're involved in. So, but 80% of Americans don't have any investment in that. And when the stock market takes a hit, money moves from the stock market to the bond market, because the bond market is safer. So what does that do? Immediately, it lowers interest rates. And if you want to prevent, which we were headed to a complete economic collapse after 4 years of Biden, he had just completely overwhelmed the country with illegal aliens costing us money. We'd had disaster after disaster, which I'm not even going to go into the conspiracy theories on why I believe the 15-minute cities are just intentionally being set up by the left because they want communist cities, basically. I think they're being formed by multinational groups. Maybe parts of our government are involved in it. So Trump is taking, and he's trying to keep the middle class and the lower class alive by lowering interest rates, because that will help. In the end, that won't be where it ends. He's in the process of, first of all, if we give a haircut to the top 20% of people, do we really care? These people can afford the haircut. Right now, the middle class and the lower class are on the verge of falling off of a cliff. Everybody I know, almost everybody related, and I'm not going to get into, I have a lot of clients who are having financial problems. And they're people you would never, ever believe it. In other words, these people have been successful all their lives. And we're hanging on the edge of a cliff. Nope, I don't think people realize economically how on the edge of a cliff that America is on. And the people at the level above where I'm at and otherwise just have no clue that the other people in the country are on that cliff, because there aren't good jobs out there unless you are a government employee or you are working for one of the big corporations. The second part of this, which I don't know if Trump is ever going to get done, is they're going to have to break up companies like BlackRock and Vanguard, and there's a third company I think that's one of the big companies in the world, because they're sucking up all these companies. They're going to try to suck up all the housing. For instance, they love it when people are foreclosed on. They're going to turn us into a society of renters, so we don't own our own home. We don't own anything, just like the World Economic Forum was talking about. You're going to own nothing and be happy. The only way that can happen is if they were maybe put a chip in our brain and we're feeding us bullshit all the time. So, I mean,
Richard, hang
where
on.
they want to go.
Let's I want to pause here for a second. AK, you've pulled up the reciprocal tariffs. Do you want to dive into this a little bit?
Yeah, so I like where your head's at. Kind of breaking down what the overall kind of two-pronged focus of what these tariffs could do. I'm not. I wouldn't say I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that I oppose what you've laid out. I do think that another way that I view what Trump is trying to do, it's like the big ask, right? Art of the deal. The big ask is, can we basically dismantle the liberal economic order that was established because of the Marshall Plan and the United States has been living under the boot of? Can we do that? That's the big ask. And there's a lot of powers that be that have made it this way. Now, I am more of like, I have a Thomas Sowell poster behind me. I have read Sowell's. I've read, I think, 5 or 6 of his books. Same with Milton Friedman. And there's this premise that I agree in general from an economic theory that having free trade and having open markets and free markets is a good thing. And having capitalism is an amazing thing. But the problem is that the liberal economic order that was established is a rigged system, a system in which you don't truly have free trade with other nations because these other nations have set up artificial barriers that we have signed off on. And when I say we, I mean the government, not necessarily the American people. The American people are really focused on, I'm going to take care of my family, right? I'm going to go to my job, make sure that my kids get a good education, make sure that they're safe, make sure that people are fed. That's what I'm focused on. All in the meanwhile, you've had this destruction of the middle class because that's the only possible solution when we give away our economic sovereignty, because it's no longer in our hands. Other powers that be are going to make decisions about America's economic longevity. And right now we are on a downswing in which other nations are making decisions saying, no, have the open borders. We're going to bring in cheap slave labor to your country, and we're going to do it all over Europe. And the reason why we're doing this is because we're no longer interested in this idea of nations having their own sovereign economies. All the economies are connected together. And so this is not a conspiracy. All you have to do is go and read The Great Reset, right? I'm not talking about like, secret clandestine, like quite literally the WEF has multiple papers published. You can read their analysis. You can look at the 2050 plan. You can look at, having, zero carbon footprints, all these different things. They're not conspiracies. It's just a way of controlling and governing people. And there are people that will stand to make a lot of money by controlling the rest of the world. Where President Trump stands up, and again, the big ask is, can we dismantle the liberal economic order that has chained the United States economic sovereignty? Now, I don't think that President Trump can do this in one fell swoop. This is a multi-year, possibly multi-decade process. Because again, it took us almost 80 years to get here. It's going to take a little bit of while to get it back. However, because it's a big ask, at least what he wants to do is say, can we please sell some cars in Japan? in South Korea, in Germany? Can we at least sell some American products that right now we are being held out of the market, which will allow American companies to be able to start manufacturing and producing again? Not overnight, but can we at least change that a little bit? And so the reason I have these reciprocal tariffs pulled up is so people can actually understand and see what actually is happening. What's happening here is all of these countries, right? These are the tariffs imposed by the United States, or by other countries against the United States. And then the yellow is what the United States said, okay, here's what we're going to charge, all right, to be reciprocal. And so at the end of the day, if you want to be an effective trade partner with us, then you're going to have to buy more products so we don't have as much of a trade deficit, or lower your actual tariffs. And that's how this formula is being posed. So that's kind of what I think. So I think ultimately, if President Trump can get our own sovereignty back, that's what he wants first and foremost. Like that's like the top goal. But even if we can't fully wrestle away our own economic sovereignty, at least we can make it that we can start producing more products here. And I do agree with what you're saying, Richard, that interest rates are a huge part of that, because interest rates are destroying the middle class right now. And honestly, I think there's some analysis that when you take a look at how many people are invested in leverage in the stock market, you know, it's kind of like a little bit of a trade-off, because yes, a lot of, you know, I would say middle class folks that are invested in pensions and also invested in 401ks, when the numbers go down, when the economy and stocks start to go down, you're going to see a little bit of impact. But I also used to be financial planner-ish guy. I had my Series 6 and 63. So I technically wasn't a financial planner, but I could give investment advice on retirement assets. And so we all know that when you're, 10 years away from retirement, you're a way different investor, or you should be, than when you are 30 years away from retirement. So if you were leveraged heavily in the stock market with a bunch of stocks in your portfolio, like 80% stocks, 20% bonds and cash holdings, fire your financial person, because my goodness, you should not be that exposed that close to retirement. But unfortunately, the truth is some Americans don't go and meet with their financial advisor, and they're still heavily invested in stocks. And so I think that was President Trump's calculus. His calculus was less people are invested in the market. And so, yes, there's going to be some tumbles and some losses, but overall, if we can get manufacturing, and not just manufacturing, but just the sale of American products in other nations at a higher percentage, that will bring more American jobs back here on our soil to be able to help the middle class.
I love what you just said, but here's what I want to add to what you're saying, because I think everything you said I agree with.
Yeah.
But what I want to add to this is I want to address the people like Rand Paul and his dad that are like laissez-faire people. Okay. They believe in the free trade. Absolutely. And I was an economics major. So this is what I want to say. The argument to me was in the long run, a fair trade always makes you more money. It always makes more wealth. That's not true. And the reason it's not true, it is true that it makes both parties wealthier when you trade, because one person could do it more efficient than you. But this is what they don't recognize. I was also a political science major. Politics trumps economics. And in the long run, if you have laissez-faire economics, politics will intervene and stop that. And that's what we're trying to prevent. If the power dynamics are such that the United States falls, we won't have freedom anymore. So our top priority has to be freedom, because the economic world and the political world are a series of short runs. They are not the long run. Now, the Keynesians say, well, we're all dead in the long run. Okay, that's ridiculous too. But I have a different theory, and I'm more in a different class. I believe that we're in a series of short runs. And what you have to remember is that politics can trump economics. And look at China. Look at the hell that Mao put his people through. And to be honest with, they are still under the boot of communism. They've never had it released. They got it released a little bit because they were kind of forced to, but they are, if they could find a way to communize the rest of the world, they would do it. And if they do it, we will live for 100 years under their boot of that kind of communist, no freedom world. So we can't just look at this. I know Rand Paul and those kind of guys are all free market, all this. That it'd be nice if we lived in that world, but that would be like living in what some Christians like call the millennium. Well, Jesus is reigning. Jesus is not reigning. The Chinese are sitting on the Panama Canal. They will not give it up, even though we've got treaty rights to take it back if it's abused. And let's go look at what's happening in the world. South Korea elected a populist leader. The Chi-Coms have gone into South Korea. They took control of the lawyers and the Supreme Court, and they removed a populist leader. So now, in effect, China is like dangling South Korea like this. Instead of South Korea being our ally, now they're essentially, because they were removed the populist leader, which was probably their last chance to sustain freedom, they are now the puppet of communist China. And who else did they just arrest in the last week? Le Pen in France. They have effectively stopped the entire populist movement in France because they arrested Le Pen. There's no one that can replace her. No one in terms of the populist movement. The best things we had going on were, in a couple other countries like Italy. Italy, man, is doing great. Their leader is talking about withdrawing from the EU. They're not going to go to war in Ukraine. Things like that. But we can't underestimate the political power of the globalists.
Yeah, I love what you just said, because Thomas Sowell talks about this, right? The reason why, like, this kind of liberal, centralized planning economics makes sense is because they go out and they say to the voters, hey, do you like what you have right now? And if you don't like what you have, you say, no, I don't like what I have. We say, I can promise you this. And you don't ask questions, well, how are you going to do it? What do you have to give up? Another thing that Thomas Sowell famously says is there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. And so from an economic standpoint, it's like, this is a really bad economic idea. But politically, it's advantageous. But then when you pass all of the political and make the political choices, by the time they come due, most of the time those political leaders are no longer in office anymore. So they can't even be held accountable for the poor economic decisions and outcomes. And so what I will say this, you're pulling at this thread that I think a lot of people, some that watch, listen, and read to alternative media understand this, but populism is a direct threat to globalism. And really the reason that it is, like, globalism is like, we're going to centrally control and plan economies on a global scale. That's what the liberal economic order did. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every single player has nefarious intentions. I actually think that some of these people are just like, if we control things, there's going to be less turmoil. Now, I do believe that there are evil people mixed in as well, so don't get me wrong. But I do think that for a lot of people, the reason they're like, yeah, it's just easier to control things. And you have this entire theory, right? The democracy theory, that democracies don't go to war with each other and all these different things. And if they are economically reliant upon other nations and these nations stand together as a bloc, then you're going to have less wars. But the truth is that you actually have more wars, just on smaller scales, in order to keep the power in the hands of the people that you want to have the power in. And that is antithetical to the populist movement of having national sovereignty. And that's why you're seeing people like Bukhari. He did it great. He was like, we're taking over everything. And that's what you really have to do in order to push back against the forces that exist. Plus, El Salvador just wasn't in the same economic stratosphere that all these other nations are, such as Italy, such as South Korea, right? Such as France. And so because of that, you're starting to understand that as long as you are challenging the current paradigm of power that is this centrally planned and controlled global economy that the United States, even during Trump's first term, he was trying to like pull away, and he saw how powerful this apparatus is. This is the only way to do it. You have to attack the economics of it. And I'm telling you, if President Trump could wave a magic wand and overnight get everything he wanted, I think the United States would be in a far better place. And I think globally, other nations would have to start to figure stuff out. It's just the natural conclusion. You mentioned it earlier, Richard. These 15-minute cities, right? The idea of that you will own nothing and you will be happy and eat the bugs and all this stuff is because you can only naturally go down that path. You have to stifle humanity, innovation, and growth. Because as you have more and more humans, more and more people are going to want more and more things. So you have to purposely put the brakes on all of these growth models and say, no. You don't want that. You don't want to work full time. You don't want to have 2 cars. You'd rather work 15 hours a week. You'd rather live in a walkable distance to everything you could possibly want. Doesn't that sound like a great life? And that's the allure, because then you are easier to control. And there are less human beings, and those that have the centralized control and power remain in power. And that's what we're currently at. That's why there's this push and pull, because that current system is right now being threatened by President Trump and other populist movements across the globe.
Yeah, what you're the 15-minute city, what you're describing, what's funny about this, it's called feudalism. All the peasants lived around the castle within 15 minutes of the castle, 15-minute walk. So who do you think is pushing this political system for 15-minute cities and all this garbage? It's the same feudalist lords going back to England who we kicked the hell out of our country. I mean, these are the same feudalists that people have been fighting for 1,500 years to end, since the end of the Roman Empire, when feudalism formed with these small little, I would call them 15-minute cities. Yes, they're 15-minute forts. Really? That's what I want to. I want to be a peasant living in a 15-minute city, which is nothing more than a peasant around the feudal fort. I don't think so. And so the number one, I know economics is important, but I think that Al is going to agree with me, freedom. That is our top goal. If we have to do tariffs, whatever we have to do to ensure and guarantee our freedom, by God, that's what we got to do. And that's what Trump is doing.
Yeah. And, I wanted to kind of throw this out there to you as well, Bella. As you are the person that I think has the best pulse, just because of your personal lifestyle and your outgoing, amazing nature, and the way that you talk to everyday working class Minnesotans, Americans. What are you getting from a vibe from people that you're interacting with when it comes to the tariffs? Are people afraid that you're running into? Are people like, no, Trump, I think give him his chance, give him his shot? Like, where do you come from, kind of from that perspective?
I think 100% of the people agree with. I think that Trump has almost 80% of the people on his side at this point. I think that the only people not on his side are mentally ill leftists. I think that they're cheating in the elections. And look at the Wisconsin election over there. I am a member of the Wisconsin bar. I tried to get in again because I was going to renew my license. Guess what they did? They passed a rule: if you're inactive for so long, I got to go through a complete background check again. Then they were going to ask me about all my religious activities, my political activities, and this to go through that. And I'm not going to do it. I'm going to sue them. Because what they're doing is now the Wisconsin Supreme Court is controlled by the leftists because of that election last week, which just happened. And the thing that's more, so they want to redistrict that state and pick up 2 to 3 more congressional seats to perhaps take over Congress. That's what they were trying to do in doing all that stuff. That's why I'm arguing about political power. They know, the left understands it's about political power, and they will grab that political power any way they can. And so we just got to hang on to freedom. And it may be tough. And I'm not going to deny this. It could cause a world war, what Trump is doing, because the New World Order, I don't believe that it's going to go away. I think that the forces of the New World, I think that I've said this, and I don't want to say anything bad about some of the secret societies, but a lot of people in the secret, like the Freemasons, like
Hey, now I'm a
Catholic,
Freemason. I am a Freemason.
and listen to me. I know really good Freemasons. Trump could be secretly a Freemason, okay?
Yeah.
And I know Rand Paul is a Freemason. However, okay, let's be real here. This is foolishness. That a world government is going to enslave the world. It is not going to free the world. Anybody that believes that is buying the Kool-Aid from the guy making poison Kool-Aid. That's what you're doing. Don't.
Yeah, we need sovereignty, man. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the notion of having a global government is so absurd. I mean, the United States, yes, we're a much bigger nation now, but when we first started, we didn't have 340 million people, but we have such a wide area with so many different interests. Even keeping our union of states together was difficult. Now you want to try and do that under an entire global government. It's just, it's patently absurd because you're going to have to oppress certain people. It is fundamental to the system in order, if you're going to have one cohesive system and you don't have shared cultural values across the entire globe, you're going to have to oppress those, because there are people that will die and say, I will never bend the knee. And I think that that is horrifying, but that's what some of these folks actually want. They want the control, and they view it as a fair trade-off. Now, Bella, I wanted to ask you, because, you know, Richard and I have been on a roll for like a half hour.
No,
what do you think, Bella?
So I invited Richard.
Yeah.
I got to know Richard back in 2020 through Jay Dugan. I'll keep this kind of short, but I want to give the background. I was having a lot of issues trying to just see my dear sweet mother, and Richard was able to help educate me on, you know, the ridiculousness of the draconian measures that were being imposed. And since then, we've become really good friends. And what I really like about Richard, and why I asked him tonight, is you know a lot. You know a lot more than me. And tariffs are way over my pay grade at this point. I really haven't dealt with them, really haven't dug into them. But it was very, very important that we do dig into them, because this is fundamentally changing. And one of the things that I have said early on is that Trump is fundamentally changing how our government is structured, and internationally how we are managing and changing the course of the United States.
Yeah.
Man on the street, which you asked me about.
Yep.
The biggest reason, and we all know, I mean, Trump won massively. And my stories from going through McDonald's, where we're everyday workers making wages, trying to afford things, it got to the point that everybody was saying, we can't afford to live. Like what Richard said, people are in serious economic hardship. And the stories that I would bring to the show in the past of somebody having 2 and 3 jobs. Well, when all of a sudden they're starting to see our leader back in charge and talking about things, and we all know the drill, baby, drill. If we can reduce the costs of our energy and make it plentiful, it's going to reduce everything. It's going to reduce inflation. Prices are already starting to come down. I bought a bag of Caesar premix at Target today for $2.59, for God's sakes. But the man on the street is that they are trusting and supporting what he is doing, and that's why we got him in office. Here we go.
I want to know how many of you agree with this one thing. When you saw Trump flipping burgers at McDonald's, and then you saw him riding the trash truck with the trash man, how many of you knew that Trump was going to win the election that day?
Oh, I did.
That was the day I said, Trump is flipping burgers at McDonald's, and he's riding in the trash truck with the Trump train. And I said, that is it. He has shown that he's the everyman. He's winning this election.
You know, so the thing that the reason I threw it over to you, Bella, is, you know, you sent me over this article. And you know, it's kind of this interesting dynamic, because during the election, President Trump, whenever he was asked about what are you going to do help the economy. He would mention, we got to close our borders because, people are taking advantage of our system economically and taking away from American jobs. Plus you got the crime, plus all these different things. But he would always mention about energy. Like, we need to have cheaper energy, and that is going to help our economy. And so, you sent me this article that oil dived 7% to lowest in over 3 years on China's tariffs. It's just funny how, like, depending on which corporate news article you read, the way that they frame it, that it dives like lowest over 3 years. Now, listen, people that have paid attention to your show understand that, yes, having the price of crude oil and oil futures and all these things drop eventually leads to lower oil costs for us. However, because you have taxes, because you have to be able to actually make it financially lucrative for companies to go and explore, there kind of is a breaking point.
Yes.
So it's like, it's true that certain people might say this is terrible. I think overall, investors will figure it out. If the shale oil is, it's too expensive to go and grab the shale oil. If oil drops down to $20 a barrel or something like that, fine, we'll deal with it. But I would love to see the price of gas drop. And because there is some volatility and we have a global oil market, it's not just here in the United States. Some prices are going up in certain places. Some prices are going down. But overall, the long-term trajectory, this is a good move. I think that because President Trump is continuing to say, like, we are going to be energy independent again. We are going to explore all opportunities and possibilities when it comes to not just oil, but liquid natural gas and other actual, nuclear, this clean coal technology, things that actually are going to be reliant, plentiful, and very cheap. If you can do that with your energy production in a nation, then you're going to be able to make your economy thrive. And so it's nice to be able to see that you're already starting to see these things happen. And I think it's, buckle up, man, because we're just getting started here. And I'm curious, Richard. So from your perspective, when you mention, the potentiality of having a world war, I'm curious because I would be foolish to say that I think that President Trump can solve, almost 80 years of a liberal economic order and rip it all down in one term. I just don't think it's possible. I think that Trump would be willing to make certain concessions if it looks like we're going to head towards that, because I don't think he wants to necessarily be the person in charge of going into a world war unless we get just straight up attacked on our country. Then at that point, like 90% of Americans probably be in favor of him retaliating back. But I'm just curious, like, do you think it's going to be that we get pulled into a world war, or do you think that it will be like an attack directly on us?
Here's what my concern is, Al.
Or AK.
I believe that. What's that?
I said, or AK.
Oh, AK. I'm sorry.
That's all right, brother.
AK-47.
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right.
I'm just teasing you. I like the AK actually myself. I have one.
Oh, nice.
So you're good there. It's a good survival gun. So no, what I'm concerned about is that I think we got a Supreme Court decision today that was going to fund U.S. aid, which is it's just a communist propaganda unit around the world. Why would the Supreme Court do that? So here's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the globalists inside of our government, inside of our corporations, inside of our schools. They will do things so nuts to betray this country. I am like, let's look back in history. How did Babylon fall? You know how Babylon fell? Somebody told that you couldn't get through the walls. Babylon, the walls were too high. There's no army in the world at the time of Babylon that could have taken the walls of Babylon. The way that Babylon fell was someone in the inside told them if they blocked off the river at this certain location, they could go in under the wall and through using the river. And before the Babylonians even knew they were there with spears and shields and swords and murdered all the armed Babylonians. And it was over. It was over in hours. And that's what I'm concerned about. The same thing let's look at the Trojan War and the famous story of Achilles, and if I never pronounce his name correctly,
Achilles
and
Agamemnon. Yeah.
was his adversary from Troy. Troy was deceived by a Trojan horse. And Trump in his first term was deceived by, I think our Attorney General Barr was a Trojan horse. I think so many of these people are Trojan horses, and it scares me because they are everywhere. I mean, I can't believe, why would you promoting the trans agenda in schools as a Trojan horse? Because it's hiding grooming. Anybody that thinks it's not hiding grooming is lying to themselves, is all I can say. You are lying to yourself. I know you want to think nicer of people, but that is not, it's just a grooming technique. You're lying to yourself, you're being deceived. And there are people, so many people in this country, when I see people keying Teslas, I mean, I heard that they're saying that Elon doesn't agree on all the tariffs. Am I going to go key a Tesla because he doesn't agree on one issue with Trump? Oh my God, I'm not an idiot, right? But you see these people that are like bots. They have no control over themselves, and they go, they used to love Tesla. They thought Elon Musk was the greatest when he was a liberal. Now they're insanely trying to, I think it scares me when I look at this. I have never in my life seen such insanity, and it is nothing more than they are completely propagandized. They are completely mental. And when I see what just happened in Korea, where the Supreme Court throws the leader out without justification because he's trying to listen to the Korean people after they duly elected him, I even think that could happen to Trump. I think the deep state, and I think that there are creeps within our own government that will try this at some point. So the question is, can Trump survive it? And they're going to try to kill him again. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah,
Go ahead. You say, because
so Richard, there's a couple of interesting dynamics. So one, I agree with you that it likely will come from most likely like a subversion within our own people to try and drag us. I still do think that, trying to get us pulled into conflict with Iran is still kind of like the highest probability. I don't think, right now going into kinetic warfare with China is really on the table directly. But I could see Iran doing some stuff that's not Iran directly, but players that want to get America to really,
is
go all
Russia
in with,
an ally of Iran?
Correct. And so because of that, that's kind of how I see it. But you touch on this point that I think really wraps things in a very good way to understand that there's not just one specific action. This is the thing about leftists, Marxists, communists. They never just have one pot boiling. They've got multiple pots. Yeah. And so if you look at this, right, looking at the Tesla takedown, there's this mass organizing mobilization effort that is being done by multiple organizations. 5051 is one of them. The other one is Indivisible, right? USAID and all these other types of entities were 100% wholly providing funding to these organizations, right? And you're starting to see this. So this map, if everyone looks, these are all of the places in the United States and in Europe, right? The United States and in Europe that these Tesla takedowns are occurring. This is part of a concerted effort to, again, try and say, look at the people, the people, the movement, to push back against the populism of the right. They're trying to manufacture this faux outrage of the populism on the left. I don't think it's going to work, but the fear is if they put enough fear into people, go back to what we initially were talking about, Richard, right? Political, what matters more, economics or politics, right? Even if Trump is doing all the right moves economically, and in the long term, it's going to be best for us economically. If people politically are able to get some points and they are able to then take out a handful of more Republicans coming into the midterms because economically things aren't working out. So politically, you have the left against us, and then they impeach President Trump and they stop the entire agenda. So this is what's so fascinating is President Trump has to walk this very interesting line where if he doesn't get exactly what he wants economically, and the Tesla takedown movement and others like it start to actually gain traction among the American people, and they're just like, see, Trump said he was going to do this, and look at what's happening. And even if Trump does an amazing job at laying out this is what's going to happen, because he talked about it, he said we're going to have some pain. It's going, there's going to be some pain that happens here economically, but it's going to be for your betterment. My fear is that Trump doesn't know when to pull back, and politically he loses power. And then in 26, you have Democrats controlling the House, and then they impeach him. I don't think they'll be able to flip the Senate quite yet. And so he won't actually, he'll be acquitted of his impeachment, but they'll just jam up the whole system. And then everything grinds to a halt. So I'm just curious, do you think these Tesla takedowns are kind of part of this larger narrative and movement to try and get, like a left populism to try and change the political winds so they can take all the wind out of President Trump's sails?
I think the Tesla, I don't believe they're going to take down Tesla, but I think it's a distraction from something else bigger that they're going to do. That's what I think. I think that there are real dangers. I think that, I support Israel, but I don't know that I want to get into a war with Iran, not because I think Iran could do any damage to us, but I think that they have a big ally, and that's Russia. And again, I don't agree with a lot of things Russia does, but they're the big nuclear power on that side of the world. And I think we should do what we can not to antagonize and cause a direct nuclear war. And that's just, if we have to fight them, we do, but I don't think I want to avoid unnecessary, because there's so much deception in the world. You don't, if you take rash moves, because the other side can create a deception, try to get you drawn in. I like 9/11. Who were the people that ran into the towers? Were they recruited by our own CIA? I mean, there's a lot of questions as to how that whole event occurred, whether it was genuine, all kinds of stuff, for instance. But we know that they drug us into this war in Afghanistan, and in fact, USAID or whatever these NGOs were giving money to the Taliban to fight us. They were actually paying for their bullets on their arms. This is documented now. They were actually helping pay for their bullets. So literally, our government was giving money to people. Well, first of all, funding our military. Our military was in Afghanistan, and then the other side, through the back door, was getting money from leftist NGOs to fight our military.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and
unbelievable.
So the thing for me is that while I think that Tesla takedown ultimately won't be successful, like they're not going to actually take down Tesla.
No.
What I'm more concerned about is that they will be able to create enough of a political will that if things in the economy get a little bit more difficult before they get better, that they're able to kind of take that in the same way that Occupy Wall Street took a lot of,
100%.
took a lot of energy, but then obviously from Occupy came what? The Tea Party movement. What came from the Tea Party movement? Yeah, Romney got thrashed, but that eventually gave way to President Trump, right? So, when you kind of balance all these things, I wanted to touch on this and then probably get ready to start wrapping some things up. So the Federalist reported on a survey, and the headline just says it all. When you look into the actual details, it's pretty straightforward. 55% of self-identified leftists say killing Trump is justifiable, like quite literally. And so this is where we're at. So when you layer this on top of the fact that President Trump with these tariffs, I believe, you believe as well, Richard, is trying to reorganize this liberal economic order so America can regain its economic sovereignty and push back against the centralized planning of these communists and Marxists and leftists.
Absolutely.
When you couple that on top of the fact that you have these Tesla takedowns that are being organized all across the country, you have these town halls being organized. I mean, Bella, you went and you took a drive around in your neck of the woods. And did you see any of those protesters that were out on, what day was that, Saturday or Sunday? You and I had chatted on the phone.
Yeah, you sent me the video. It was over by my health club that I go to, but I didn't see them. I just saw the.
I think by then they had moved to the Capitol. I mean, when you look at the aerial shots, like there were a lot of people, 10,000 plus for sure. It
paid
the entire. Oh yeah, and paid too. But the point is, when you couple that then with this survey, that 55% of self-identified leftists say killing Trump is justifiable, it just seems like they're going all in on trying to stop this right of center populist movement to try and truly assert our own economic sovereignty into the global system again in the United States. And I just think people need to be aware that these things are happening and be prepared for it. So how are you, like, what do I say when I say be prepared? Am I saying like doomsday prepper, apocalypse? No. I'm just saying, understand that this is happening. Do not be oblivious and be like, oh no, these types of things only happen in Europe and, these small throwaway countries. And, sorry if you're from a small throwaway country, where you get these mass movements and violence in the streets. Obviously people lived through the George Floyd riots, but it was kind of weird because of COVID lockdowns. People already kind of weren't traveling. So there was a lot of people in greater Minnesota that saw it from afar and said, that looks terrible, but they didn't come to the Twin Cities. Now imagine if again, this actually catches some legs and you start to see something where you're not having lockdowns and you're seeing this. So I'm just saying, don't be caught off guard, plan accordingly, but definitely there are all of these things, in my opinion, are all connected. There's not one independent action. It's kind of, again, I think the leftists and the central planners have a bunch of different pots on the stove, on all their little burners, and they're simmering them all. And if they can get some type of, synchronicity that happens with them, better, but they're trying to hedge their bets on a bunch of different things. And I just think, again, people need to understand 55% of self-identified leftists say that killing Trump is justifiable. So I think you have to be aware of that. Well, on that bright and happy note, I'm curious some of you guys' opinions before we get ready to wrap the show.
So Trump wasn't, I know, Richard, when you said when he was in McDonald's and the dump truck and you thought, that's it, Trump's going to win.
Yep.
This is a historic and epic time in our history to be witnessing something that literally was not supposed to happen. I remember the night of the election. First of all, let's go back a few steps here. I couldn't find anybody I call it Minna-stupid, but every McDonald's, whether they were old enough to vote or not, they were all voting for Trump. We said that this election was going to go on for months, contested, still counting. No way were they going to declare it that night. Not only did they declare it that night, he won all the swing states. He won the popular. It was something massive like we've never even seen before. And where did this all come from? Because we are an woke society. For me to be able to just go through McDonald's and you have kids that are not old enough to vote, and not only could they tell me that they would vote for Trump if they were of age, but they could tell me why. What we're seeing is the largest scale globally. Yes, we're fighting this globally, but we're also seeing the Trump derangement syndrome that is just on absolute hyperdrive. And, they go from wanting us to have electric vehicles to then keying them and destroying. And the thing is, at the end of the day, and I've had this discussion, I believe that there's a divine intervention in here. We are in a fight between good and evil. And the American people stood up and said what they wanted when we elected, and the globalists and the left and all of the insanity, they're going to fight all that they want to, but nothing so far has stopped Trump. And he is a mastermind, and he has gone after the root cause of what we have to do is take our economy and put everybody back into their place and take control and bring in sovereignty and bring in freedom. And I believe that I had this conversation with somebody the other day. We really don't know the absolute end game. I mean, Trump is so brilliant that all we can do is sit here and give our commentary and watch and continue to spread the word of getting people listening and learning and tuning in, which is part of the mission of this show. But I'm delighted in the fact that we are seeing things. This is not a regular presidency. He is shoving things through so fast because, like you mentioned, AK, with the midterms in 26, imagine if he accomplishes what he's trying to do and the economy is turned around and inflation is brought down and jobs are coming back and we are thriving and surviving. We could see another big red wave and then the success in the 28 election.
I think that this thing to say, though, is that the war has just begun because Trump won it. This is just the beginning of the fight. And I think Al's going to, or AR is going to agree with me.
AK. Almost
AK. I got to remember. AK.
LMNOP.
I'm just going to call you AK-47, right?
Yeah. AK-47 because AK and the 47th president of the United States. I real quick wanted to say that Supreme Court has voted to allow President Trump, well, that's nice of them, to continue removing Venezuelan nationals who are suspected members of Tren de Aragua from the country under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. So that's a good win for President Trump's administration, that instead of having a district judge say, yeah, I can rule for the entire nation, Supreme Court at least said that indeed President Trump can deport the suspected members of this cartel under the Alien Enemies Act of 1798.
Thank God.
What is your feelings on that, being that you're a lawyer? Do you think that's a good ruling from the Supreme Court? You happy with it?
Of course. He has plenary power under Article 2 of the Constitution to control or to run the military as a commander-in-chief and to protect the country from outside threats. And that's it. He doesn't need their permission. If I was Trump and the court told me this, I wouldn't even appeal it. I just given him the finger.
Absolutely. And that's how it should have been, right? Like the idea of these district judges making rulings across the entire nation is absurd. We're not talking about
it's not absurd.
We're talking about a single activist judge.
There's a difference. You got to understand there's a difference between the legislative jurisdiction and what executive. If it's solely within the executive power in the executive branch, which this is, removing Tren de Aragua, however you pronounce that, it's his plenary power, which means it's his power alone and nobody can contest it. If Congress had passed a specific law on something, okay, then the courts have the right to intervene to enforce the law. But the courts could also determine, looking at the law, that the Congress has infringed on Trump's plenary power, or they could say, no, Congress has the right to intervene. And that's where the court comes into balancing Congress between the executive. But if this is a matter of national security, a matter for the commander-in-chief, I believe it's plenary power, which is what Trump's lawyer, the bald guy, the smart bald guy, can't think of his name, brilliant. He used to be the chief lawyer for that group of lawyers that litigated for freedom. So the question is whether it's exclusively within the executive power. Can there be some legislative issues involved? I don't think so. As a lawyer, I really believe that he has a right to remove those people. And they're trying to say that the tattoos isn't a big thing. However, it is, because to get into Tren de Aragua, my understanding is you have to kill somebody. So those tattoos represent people who have killed somebody, maybe not in the U.S., but they killed somebody, Venezuela or along the way or some way, to get into that organization. So, yeah, I mean, Trump, there's legislation that gives Trump the power to declare them terrorists or foreign adversaries on multiple fronts. They have no excuse. The judge is a communist. The judge ought to be, well, I'm not going to say it, but our founding fathers would have had some tar and feathers.
These activist judges, which, I mean, this has been the one, I know that sometimes Supreme Court can be a little bit squirrely with Amy Coney Barrett and also Justice Roberts. They get wonky on certain issues, but for the most part, they've come through on certain things. But I'm glad to see them come through on this because, kind of like you already laid out, and this is not my original thought. I actually heard this being discussed by what's his name? Will, I can't remember his name. No, not Will Kane. From Florida. He was on Joe Pag's show. But anyways, he was talking about basically that the relief if we accidentally deport a Tren or a suspected Tren de Aragua member, and we find out later that they weren't in Tren de Aragua, they can always just come back to the United States. Whereas if we don't deport them and they are here and they are subverting and committing crimes as a criminal cartel recognized now by the United States government as a terrorist organization, there is no relief when they go and commit crime. So, just Will Chamberlain is his name. And so ultimately, again, not my idea. It made sense to me. And so I'm glad to see the Supreme Court ruling this way. Because again, the idea that you have these judges doing this activist judge thing, subverting the will of the people, to be quite honest, right? They're appointed. They didn't run for office, and they can jam up a duly elected president that got the popular vote. But, the popular vote doesn't matter. I just like to say that because it makes Democrats mad, but won the Electoral College because that's all that matters. So yeah, that's fantastic. So Bella, I know that we're over time. I actually got to get running here. I love the conversation. Definitely want to have you back, Richard. You are so knowledgeable about these topics. I could talk. I think you and I could have our own podcast just talking about
Hey.
No, I'm not saying that we're going to. I said we could because there's a lot of great issues that we could get into. But I'd love to have you back as well.
We could go eat a pizza someplace, and I could tell you and I both like to eat pizza.
Oh, I love to eat pizza.
No, I mean that's an easy one for us there.
Absolutely. So Bella, do you want to start shutting her down? Oh, you know what? We got some comments. Let me read through a handful of these. Shout out to Guy Archambault. He's a guy that I actually know, a guy named Guy. And he said, good weather incoming as well. Yeah, good weather along with a great administration. Shout out to Mary Greer. Had a couple of comments and great info. AK Paula Primo said correct, or Premio, I should say. And so, thank you for the comments. We will try and always read comments throughout the show at some point and at some time. And so thank you so much for those comments. But again, make sure that you guys, if you like what you've heard and you're watching it even after the fact, you can always share it on whatever platform that you're watching this show. It seems like there's some issue with X. I got a couple of messages on X saying that the broadcast says unavailable. Going to try and work on that, get that figured out. So if you were trying to watch on X and then you jumped over to either X, I should say Facebook, or maybe you jumped over to YouTube or to Rumble, we'll try and get that up and going next time.
Spring is here, guys. The Bears woke up and raided my trash, and it's all over my yard.
Oh, that's
so spring
horrifying.
Has to be here. Because
he's in northern Minnesota.
Yeah, that's horrifying. Little did you know, Richard, there's only one thing in this entire world that I am afraid of man, beast, or otherwise, and that are bears. I am terrified of bears to the point I will not camp outside ever if there's bears. I'll camp in the middle of North Dakota, flat. You can see things coming from forever. But yeah, I literally will not camp. And I just had a friend of a friend who was telling me about their story of camping up in the Boundary Waters, and a bear was like walking around their campground. Nope. So I'm never coming up to you. You can come down here, Richard.
I'm going to help you pick out a large caliber revolver like a 454 Casull, and then you won't be afraid of the boogeyman anymore.
Hey man, I carry every single day concealed. I only have a 9.
Bigger one for a bear.
I know I have 9, but I got the hollow points. So I don't know how well those do against bears, but
you want a penetrating round instead of hollow point for a bear.
Sure.
Because you gotta get through his skull, or you gotta get into his heart.
Yeah, I know all about those killing machines. That's why I'm afraid of them, Richard, because they're killing machines.
Not if you've got a 454 Casull and it's loaded.
Fair.
I don't even want to kill the bear. My first shot is always the warning shot.
Sure.
So
yeah, if they take off,
I'm not that afraid of them because I've been chased by him almost a dozen times. So I've gotten to the point where he's kind of my friend.
No.
So this is another one of these shows where I think I've spoken less than probably, I don't know, a couple hundred words, but I do know when I'm not at the pay grade that I need to be to deliver the material necessary for the show tonight, and that's why I asked Richard to join. Richard,
that's just not true anyway, Bella. So.
Well,
Guy just said, he confirmed in the chat. He goes, he always turns down my camping invites, and that is true. I will not camp with bears.
Guess what? I'm not going to ask you to go camping because I don't camp, period. It's got nothing to do with bears. I just like civilization and a hotel and glass of wine and room service and all those nice things. But Richard, thank you for joining. I think you should consider joining us on kind of a regular basis. I love the information, love the companionship. I had a blast with you Friday at Olive Garden, sending me all those funny videos. This is not, I'm accustomed to being told we're in a big battle and it's just begun, and that my optimism isn't necessarily is what's going to come to fruition. But that's what I bring to the table, is my optimism and my humor and my man on the street word, because that's what I love doing, is talking to people and inspiring people and winning. And thanks, you guys. Rich, AK following or closing thoughts, Richard, and then I'll take it out.
Yep. So closing thoughts, make sure to follow this show. We're on Facebook, Red, Right, and Real with AK Kamara, Bella D'Angelo, and it's youtube.com @ Red, Right, and Real. On X, you can follow me at Real AK Kamara. We don't have an X page for the podcast quite yet, but we also are available where podcasts are available. iHeart, Apple, Google Podcasts. Usually put it up the day after because I have to, do some stuff on the back end. But yeah, make sure to follow us everywhere. Like us, share, subscribe, and that's what matters most. Thank you again, Richard, for being on. Any closing final thoughts, where people can find or interact with you if that's your thing?
I'm a lawyer. If they want, they can look me up. God bless the Patriots and long live our Republic.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Well, I saved you from some of my stories of the online dating world, but I gave a teaser, and then I gave the funny little story out of Williston. But I will say, I'm hoping there is some way that they can start drilling again in North Dakota. The problem is that they frack, and so they can't afford to drill if it's below $70 a barrel. But one way or another, we will be bringing back energy independence. And I got to say, this has been a great night. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, AK. Thanks, Richard. Good night. God bless. God bless America. And ciao for now.
Are you fired up? Then take action. Copy the link to this episode and text it to one friend who needs to hear it. Support us where you found us by liking and subscribing for future content. This is a grassroots production supported by listeners like you.